Hey folks, Evil DM here. Another episode of Railguns and Dragons. Last episode, you witnessed me do some character creation with my buddy Jeff, who's part of my gaming group, because we're going to be doing a Heroes Unlimited campaign, which will be available at rollhighordie.com under the Dead Winter or Dead Rain feed for Palladium Universe, we're calling, or Palladium Megaverse Universe, whatever we're calling the feed at this point. But you can find it there at the website. When it comes out, I'll let everybody know. I will drop some links for those as well. But today, I'm going to continue along the track. We already did the attributes. We talked about the book itself and, why I like it so much. Now we're going to talk a little bit about hit points. They're really straightforward and easily done. You basically take a D6, add it to your PE score after you roll, and boom, you're done. Your hit points. Video over, right? No, I'm just kidding. We're going to be talking a little about SDC as well, because a lot of people get confused with these things, especially when they're new to the game. SDC, structural damage capacity, is where a lot of people get confused, as I was saying, because depending on how you build your character, you can have more than one SDC, and we'll get into that in a second. SDC by itself represents the status of whatever in question. It represents a door, it represents armor, it represents your body. So there's physical and then there's structure object SDC. So this is where people get really confused. The physical body SDC is how much punishment your character can absorb or take at one point. Think about John Wick, those movies. We all love those movies. He gets beaten up, he gets stabbed, he gets punched, and he still pretty much walks away ready to continue on with his mission at hand, as long as the damage wasn't painful enough to knock him down and kill him. But John Wick will never die anyway, so when we get to the actual talking about combat in these videos, which I will do, but I want to get up to, I want to build up to that a little bit and dedicate an entire episode to those using a virtual tabletop. I'll probably use Roll20 just because it's quick, or I might use Foundry, which I'm more familiar with. Most of your damage when you're playing in combat will probably come from your SDC first. Now, whether that's going to be your body SDC or an armor SDC, it really depends on how you build your character. But when your physical, the actual SDC of your body, the scratches and wounds part of your body, as I'm just trying to emphasize that, when that's used up, you have to go directly into your hit points. Now, that's when it becomes vital. That's when it becomes the point where you go, oh, shit, I got to worry now. It's into my hit points. I mean, unless there's something that hits you that says directly to hit points, which there are things that do that in various editions of the game here and there. And I'll let you track those down because sometimes those are a bitch. Now, you can also wear armor, like I was mentioning before, and have armor that also protects you and absorbs damage, and that has its own SDC that you'll start subtracting from first. So in combat, you'll have an armor rating or an armor resistance or an armor class, depending on what game you're playing, number that the attacker has to roll over. So say, for example, your hero is wearing a flak vest, or he's wearing an armor vest, or wearing a chainmail vest, or whatever, and the armor rating of that vest is a 10. Now, anybody that's not familiar with these games thinking, well, 10, that's kind of low. Well, 10's not really that bad because it really depends on how it works. But anyway, the average person has to roll over that 10 to actually affect your body SDC. If they roll below that, the armor just absorbs those points and gets subtracted off the armor as if it's kind of falling apart. Like if you actually go into a battle, or maybe if you've gone into, trying to think, closest thing would be paintball. After a while, those things start to break down and they will just fall apart, things like that. If you go into actual real combat, if you're a military person, you'll know what I'm talking about. Things wear down, things wear out. I am by far not a military person, so if that's not true, don't yell at me. I apologize. Thank you for your service out there. Once the SDC is used up on the armor, then it goes to your body SDC. So combat kind of flows like this, and I will get into combat as we get closer to but without all the bells and whistles of combat like parry and dodge and all the other stuff, the attacker rolls. The GM has to look at it and asks himself two questions. Did he roll above the armor class or the AR of the defender? Yes? Okay. We move on to the defender's body SDC. We subtract it from there. No, it gets subtracted from the SDC of the armor he's wearing. It is a little confusing, but once you actually sit down and actually play this in combat, it won't be as mind-racking, or it won't be as confusing. Because when I first saw this way back in the 90s and the 80s, I probably 89, around there, when we were playing Palladium Fantasy and we were playing Rifts after that words in the 90s, it always confused me after coming from being a Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 1E, 2E player, to go into something like this that had armor rating with points for the armor, then having your own body rating and hit points. It was like, so it just takes a little bit of rolling, sitting down with some people and playing and looking over the rules, and you'll get used to it. There shouldn't be a problem. Now, there's also recovery time, and there's a couple options here. It really depends on the style of the campaign your GM is running. Is it serious type campaign, like by the book recovery rules? Because then you have to look over on page 11. And it has all the rules here on page 11 for recovering, and you need to first aid, medical assistance. By the book, there's certain percentages. You can only get so many points back per day. Is it a gritty campaign, which means it's by the book rules, but it's harder. And sometimes the GM is making it less than what the book says. So you're going to recover even less. It's going to be even harder. So when you get that wound, that's a serious wound. You're going to be down and out for quite a bit when it comes to those things. Is it a lighthearted campaign when the GM basically was just like, you know what? The book says this, but here's an extra 10 whatever? Or is it like comic book standard? Basically, when I'm talking comic book standard, I'm talking about modern day comic book when everybody just basically heals within a day or so and they're back on the street ready to go, and GM just goes meh. Each of these are determined by how the campaign is going to be, how healing is going to be handled on page 11. And should your hit points drop down to 0, you will fall into a coma. Or less, I should say. 0 or less, you'll fall into a coma, and you'll be basically in a near-death state, dying in a matter of hours if unattended to by medical treatment. You can go into the negative as far as your PE attribute before you are dead, gone, goodbye, kaput, and can't come back. A coma can be very deadly in this game, and without proper treatment by a medical professional can result in death in a couple hours. So if you do fall into that coma and you don't get treated, you will die pretty much. But luckily, if you get to the proper treatment and you get to the hospital, as you can see here, it depends on what it is. Recovery from a coma, you have to survive 2 of these 3 types that are listed here under recovery. And someone has to treat you from non-professional medical individual, but with medical skills, there's a 1 to 18% chance. Treatment from an intern or a nurse is a 1 in 32% chance, or I should say 1 to 32%, not 1 in. Sorry about that. A doctor without proper facilities, and it goes up and so on from there. So there's that. Now, the fun part comes in. Well, the fun part comes in for a GM, not necessarily for a player, because, you know, there's these optional rules for side effects. If you go into a coma, things can happen. You can use these optional rules here listed at the bottom of the page about, let me see if I can get the rest of it on there for you. It doesn't want to work today. Well, anyway, there is a percentage chart there going from 1 to 100 that gives you what side effects happen after you pass through that coma, and what things happen to you that are permanent, that you can't reverse. Maybe through magic, I don't know, if you want to use that in your campaign, depending on what type of campaign. But if you're playing a gritty campaign, I have a feeling you'll be using these optional rules here and these optional damage rules to show where things have been hit and how you've been hit. It's really interesting to play with a lot of these. One thing I really enjoy, and I'm going to stop here, is the Palladium rules for these optional things that happen for insanity and what things happen to you. And it's always been a fun little selling point of the game, from when we played Robotech to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Heroes Unlimited to Palladium Fantasy. It was always these optional things, and Palladium characters are so in-depth and so, I want to say, time-consuming when building, but it's well worth it because you get such, in my opinion, a well-rounded, unique type character to play. And you don't feel like you're running onto the battlefield with a cookie-cutter character that anybody could play. Sure, you will have characters that are somewhat similar, but between skills and the amount of things that you could pick, and you can go through, background stuff in this game, you can make a unique character that would suit any role-playing person or any person that enjoys these type of games. If you don't like sitting down, because character creation can be time-consuming. Now, as you saw on the stream, it took about 90 minutes with Jeff, but that's because we were doing it on a live stream, and Jeff was asking a little more questions, and it's been a while since Jeff's actually played any Palladium games. Well, I should say it's been a while since he's made up his own character in Palladium. He's played Palladium games, but not made up his own character in quite some time. And that's how the average person was going to be. I did make up another character with one of my other group mates, my buddy Steven, and it took us generally around the same time to make up the character. About 90 minutes, maybe a little bit more. And we left it so he could build the rest of his character on his own. He was going to hand me the sheet after he was done, but he got the general concept and he got everything written down. So, yeah, this game is going to be going off in probably about a month's time. I'm just waiting for our current game GM to finish his story he's doing in Star Wars D6. Once we're done with that, we'll jump right into Heroes Unlimited, which I'll have up on rollhighordie.com. So with that said, I want to say keep it original, keep it old school. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share the video around so everybody sees it, and keep it original, keep it old school. Good night.